Much like Brazil, the Zonhe region is home to some spooky folklore creatures, or other oddities. But before bringing out the popcorn and playing tonight's horror feature, I'd like to pull back the veil and introduce some of these peculiar Pokemon and the ghastly tales that surround them. However, time is of the essence, and in honor of Halloween, I'd like to focus on some of the Ghost-type Pokemon in particular in this video, especially as a handful of these Pokemon will be starring in this feature film. But fear not, this is not all of the Ghost-type Pokemon you will find in the Zonhe region. Believe me, there will be many more. Many of you have already come face to face with the kooky crocodile Pokemon, Cucavile, a ghost and poison type Pokemon inspired by Brazil's Cayman, as well as the popular crocodile witch Cuca from Brazilian mythology and pop culture, known for her long flowy hair, which can also be seen on Cucavile in the form of spectral energy. Cucavile lives in the Zonhe region's rivers and lakes, but can primarily be found in its Pantanal area. It throws berries and other ingredients into its cauldron-like jaw to cast spells, curses, or even conjure spirits. It has a pre-evolution Caidron, resembling a literal cauldron, and an even spookier final stage, Cruelca, evolving after being possessed by one of the spirits it has naively conjured up, making it an even more powerful sorcerer and part of the dark type, since tapping into this evil spirit's dark magic abilities, as the acid saliva that once filled its jaws is replaced with the face of this sinister spirit. Those who dare look into its eyes are said to be forever cursed. There's even a Pokemon from the Unova region, Z.Woobat, dressed up in the Zonhe region as a ghost-type variant, inspired by the vampire bats that plague Brazil and the rest of South America. This fiendish ghost-type variant is found throughout the Zonhe region throughout the dead of night, but can also be found lurking within its caves. Through the darkness, Zoinian Woobat emits ultrasonic waves, searching for prey to sink its teeth into, as it drains its victims of their life force. Like its relative in the Unova region, Zoinian Woobat evolves into Z.Woobat, but unlike the Z.Woobat found within Unova, the ones in the Zonhe region evolve once more into the bloodthirsty Taboobat, inspired by the infamous bloodsucker himself, Count Dracula. But you'll just have to wait to encounter this Pokemon's spooky evolutions. One of the most notable ghost-type species found within the Zonhe region is Movieater, inspired by anteaters and various classic film motifs, which are incorporated into its design, as Brazil is home to many of its own iconic horror films, taking the genre to a new level with the perfect balance of creepiness, craft, and camp. Speaking of which, don't let this cute little critter, or the fact it can be found even in the broad daylight, fool you. It feeds off of memories, using its film strip-like tongue to view the memories of those it makes contact with, playing them back like an old film, even capable of using its projector-like eyes to share them with anyone else who dares to watch. However, if it is able to eat enough of its victims' memories, they are said to fall into a coma. Movieater evolves into Filmilingua, who has an even bigger appetite for memories, and with its newfound strength and speed, will do anything necessary to devour them. But the climax of this evolutionary line is reached after evolving into the terrifying Tamantasma. Inspired by the monster from Brazilian mythology, the Capilobo, a vicious werewolf and anteater-like chimera, said to slurp its victims' grey matter as if it were devouring insects. And like the Capilobo, this Pokemon does the same thing, as memories alone can no longer feed its fiendish appetite. However, it can still use its film-like tongue to steal the memories of its victims, helping it hunt or even play with its prey as it uses their memories to carefully study their patterns. While this line typically likes to go after bug Pokemon, it has a real craving for mounds of the Fearin native Hermite, often coming toe-to-toe with one of its main adversaries, Exterminite, or colonies of Zonhe's bug and psychic type Aliant. Homage to Brazil's history with UFOs and aliens, as well as the zombie ant fungus. As if you look closely, it is also part mushroom, resembling a UFO saucer, as Aliant are brainless zombie workers serving their queen, Martiant. Its evolution, who uses the powerful fungi spores from within the saucer-like mushroom on its body to brainwash and possess its soldiers, so they have no choice but to serve her. Martiant's design expands upon the concepts of its first stage, but is even more colorful and quirky, as its design takes inspiration from a popular character from a Brazilian TV show. This Pokemon species is rumored to have landed down in the Zonhe region from an alien planet. Why this is, or whether or not this is actually true, is still to be determined. But one thing that is for sure is that it is the favorite snack of the Movieater line. And it's no surprise, as they share a hive mind with their queen. So tasting one Aliant's memories is like a full course meal for these Pokemon, making it another natural adversary for this Pokemon species. Now, of course, the Zonhe region is home to several more spooky Pokemon, as I said before, as well as plenty of more Pokemon inspired by some of the dark folklore tales from Brazil. So if there is a spooky Brazilian folklore monster you've heard of, I can guarantee you it is already part of the Zonhe region. So please stay tuned, as I do have to save some stories for the future. But this scary cinematic story will focus on a mythical poison dragon-type Pokemon, the Monswyrm, said to be hidden deep within the murky waters of the Zonhe region's Pantanal area, and measure over 300 feet long, with monstrous fangs and capable of spitting acid that can dissolve anything. This legendary Pokemon is inspired by a giant worm, or at times fish-like monster from Brazilian folklore, that I decided to give a more serpent or dragon-like qualities like a worm. To make it clear, this isn't your average Pokemon, but instead something far more monstrous. In fact, like the very creature it's inspired by, this Pokemon's existence is thought to be nothing but a myth or scary tale. One famous movie director and Ghost-type specialist and Elite Four member in the Zonhe region, José Grimorta, would like to tell. This character is inspired by a famous horror movie director in Brazil, as well as the famous movie character he plays, Coffin Joe, who has spawned an entire series of spooky movies that are cult classics in Brazil. Tonight's feature film, and the movie The Monswyrm, at least the movie Jose planned on shooting, takes place on the Pantanal area at the dead of night, as unexpected trainers will face off against several treacherous Pokemon, including the mythical Pokemon, the Monswyrm. However, this film will end up taking a turn for the worst when this creature not only turns out to be real, but they end up living out the very horror movie they sought to create, coming face to face with this monstrous mythical Pokemon, as they must fight for their lives. However, this wouldn't be the first time Daredevil director José Grimorta has found himself in a sticky situation trying to film one of his Pokemon horror movies, as he lives and breathes this sort of thing, as he has always had a flair for the dramatic and interesting Ghost-type Pokemon, with his partner Pokemon and cameraman being a goofy Gengar. Jose was drawn to Ghost-types after losing his parents at a young age. Left alone in the woods, he encountered a wild Ghastly, but he wasn't scared. In fact, he was so relieved to finally find someone else and not be alone after this tragedy. This Ghastly equally thrilled to find someone who wasn't startled by it, and seeing how scared and sad he was, decided to comfort him. From that day on, they were inseparable. Like him, Jose's parents were also in show business. His mother was an actress, and father was also a film director, always telling him that pictures and film are the only thing to live forever, immortalized throughout time, introducing him to the world of cinema. However, their tragic accident drove him towards the horror genre and Ghost-type Pokémon as his taste became a little bit more morbid over the years, which only makes sense as his only companion was a ghost Pokémon after all. Jose's Gengar even has a scary Dream-merge fusion with Ophidanga, known as Wikhead. Get it? Wikhead as in wicked and head, as it loosely is inspired by the infamous demon head in Brazilian mythology. With its crimson red coloring, iconic horns, and classic long hair, now resembling a cape. Like Gengar, it remains a ghost poison type, which is depicted by the swollen purple parts at the tips of its horns. And because Dream-merge Pokemon can make the most of both Pokemon's movesets, being able to select 2 of each of their moves, and Ophidanga learns plenty of poison-type moves, such as Poison Fang, which Wikhead would of course be able to learn as well, in addition to some of Ophidanga's fire-type moves, like Will-O-Wisp, Fire Fang, or Inferno. Now, Jose sadly won't have access to this Dream-merge fusion at the time of this tale, as the Dream-magine and Dream-merge mechanic has not yet been introduced in the Zonhe region, as it will end up being manifested by the main character of Pokemon Push or Pokemon Pool. Anyways, back to Jose himself. Jose is happy to be returning to his roots after his rise to success, as this movie particularly, the Monswyrm, is strangely personal to him, as he believes Monswyrm to be responsible for claiming the lives of his parents decades ago while their family was out in the wilderness fishing. All he remembers was their small boat being capsized and only being able to make out a large serpent-like shape swiftly moving under the murky water before coming to the surface, never to see his parents again. Now, while Jose may be a bit bizarre and quirky, with a reputation for scaring and at times even endangering his cast and crew members in a way to immerse them in his creative process, he is actually a very nice guy. He's just very passionate about his work, which led him to some issues with one of the leads of the film, famous movie star and heartthrob, not to mention water-type gym leader of the Cyreef City Gym, Marino Oceano, which I know most of you have probably heard of before. I mean, how could you not? But his sister Maria, who has traveled as far as the Firen region to escape him and the rest of her family, would be the first to tell you it's all just an act, as Marino isn't the nice guy everyone believes him to be, and he is a far cry from the hero he plays in his movies. He's actually quite the self-centered jerk, who will threaten to sink anyone in the business who doesn't cave to his demands. Something Jose was warned of, but after his last film tanked, the studio told him they wouldn't produce this passion project of his unless Marino was cast in the leading role. Something about him trying to branch out into different genres and show off his acting range, which outside of his nice guy routine is as shallow as a kiddie pool. At least his Pokemon battling skills are real, as he will be accompanied by his co-star and ace Pokemon Gentlfin on this adventure, whose beefy bachelor form will come in handy during some of these fateful encounters. Another familiar face from the Zonhe region is the secondary rival and player character's babysitter, the young influencer Carla, who will also play a vital role in this spooky tale. Brought on as Jose's personal assistant, thanks to the film's leading lady, her cousin, Nessa, from the Galar region. As Carla has always dreamed of being famous, and her recent success on social media and streaming Pokemon battles is only the beginning, as she hopes this opportunity will allow her to get her foot through the door and work her way up to the top. Little does she know that her big break may actually break her. Now, without further ado, I give you the director's cut of The Monswyrm. This tale starts with everyone arriving on the set for the movie, as José starts by thanking his cast and crew for their commitment.
A wise man once told me that the art we make will live on far long after our corpses are collecting dust, and that cinema is immortal. This film will not be easy to make, as we have a skeleton crew and bare-bones budget, but I have faith that we will succeed, as that is what we as artists do when faced with adversity. We embrace the darkness of the human condition and trauma, transforming it into something palpable, something hauntingly potent, beyond comprehension. Now, while the star of the film is believed to be nothing but a myth, and will have to be added in post, the majority of this picture will rely on practical effects and even real Pokémon to invoke real fear and general reactions out of our talent. And while this may sound dangerous, that is because it is indeed. But I'm sure you all expected nothing less before signing on to a José Grimorta film. So if any of you want to run for the hills, now would be your chance. But don't say I didn't warn you. Anyone?
In a brief moment of silence, a Gengar pops out from the shadows, scaring everyone. José begins to laugh as he reveals it to be his Gengar and the cameraman for the evening. He can see that his leading actor Marino is clearly uncomfortable and not happy with his prank, so to smooth things over, he goes to introduce him to the rest of the cast and crew, stroking his ego the entire time, and it works, especially as his young assistant Carla is starstruck by his presence, as she's always had a big crush on him since she was a little girl. Marino tells everyone how thrilled he is to be there, but in reality, he wanted nothing to do with this film and rather be anywhere else. While everyone is distracted, his assistant Carla would tell him that the leading lady and final girl of the film, Nessa, still hasn't shown up. Now he knows they are cousins, so under his breath he asks where she could be, but Carla says she's unsure, she has no signal out here. So he brushes it off and says she'll be here, and that they could circle back to her scenes later on if they have to. But they can't afford to waste any more time, as he proceeds to tell the rest of the crew. As everyone disperses, Marino pulls José aside to ask where Nessa is, as her involvement seems to have been one of the only reasons he agreed to sign on to this film, along with the prestige behind José's name. José says she's running a bit late, and they will continue without her, starting with some of Marino's scenes. Marino then asks to talk to him about the script before they start, saying he doesn't think his character should be killed off at the end of the film, and instead should sail off into the sunset with the lead. José then tells him,
Do not mistake this for another one of your romance movies. Don't forget your character not only helps this young girl on her emotional journey, as she is forced to face her literal demons and her trauma head on, but even goes as far as to risk his very own life to save her at the end. Mark my words, a performance of this caliber and depth could even win you some awards. There is nothing more heroic than a noble sacrifice after all.
This seems to get through to Marino. That is until his shoes start to get a little bit muddy, and he has a diva moment. José then looks down, noticing a ginormous trench in the mud, made by Monswyrm. He begins to examine it, almost in disbelief, as Carla asks him if he's okay. But lost in thought, he ignores her, before getting right back to work. They begin to film the first scene in a nearby graveyard. But José starts to get mad as they keep having to do retakes, as he isn't happy with Marino's acting, as he is clearly out of his element in this genre. He even ends up being upstaged by a wild Thespossum who is mocking him and his every move, as these dark-type Pokemon are known to be extra dramatic. The cast and crew laugh as they find it funny. José even makes a joke about replacing Marino with the Thespossum. Marino, not happy with any of this, throws out his Gentlfin, having it use Aqua Tail to scare off the Thespossum. José, not impressed by Marino's fragile masculinity, says they have enough footage that they need to move on. But Marino asks how he plans to do that without their leading lady. Jose says for continuity reasons, they need the lighting in the scene to be consistent, so they'll have to use creative shots and cut to close-ups of Nessa later on. Jose then spots Carla and snaps at her. She rushes over asking what he needs, but he continues to look her up and down awkwardly, before asking if she could step in for her cousin in the meantime. Carla, realizing what a big opportunity this is, jumps at the chance to prove herself. Carla then goes on to tell Marino what a big fangirl she is, and what an honor it is to be acting opposite of him, even as a stand-in. But what does Marino do? He throws a fit, saying he refuses to work with some no-name assistant. Jose's starting to lose his temper, but biting his tongue. Reminds him they will only be using shots of the back of her head, so the swap isn't as clear. Marino, still irritated and being somewhat arrogant, goes on to do the scene with Carla standing in. Afterwards, they continue on to the location of the next scene within the woods, where they can hear the sounds of wild Pokemon. But the further in they get, the harder it is to tell where they are going. They even manage to lose the rest of their crew members, but Gengar is still recording, so Jose insists that they continue on for now. But after a while, Carla points out the fact they seem to be traveling in circles, using a weird tree as an example. So they all try to look at their location using their rodent watches and phones, but still seem to have no service.
How strange indeed. But what's even more peculiar is, things are unfolding just like it does in my script. Well, not exactly. At least we're not being attacked by wild Pokemon.
And just as he says that, a sea of glowing red eyes appears visible in the darkness as a bunch of wild Trevenant appear. Carla asks if these are some of the Pokemon Jose talked about being featured in the film, but he said he's afraid not. They all begin to make a run for it as they're clearly outnumbered. After escaping, they all take a moment to catch their breath, but are interrupted as a swarm of wild Woobat come flying out at them, startling them all except Jose, of course, who is completely unfazed. Marino is done at this point and says he quits, trying to storm back to his trailer, but gets lost along the way. Carla, concerned, asks if she should go after him, but Jose says no, he's used to working with difficult talent and to leave it to him. So Jose goes to stop him, but they both end up stepping in a pit of quicksand as they slowly start to sink into the mud, neither of which able to access their Pokeballs at this point as they continue to descend into the ground. Jose's Gengar tries to pull them both out, but it's not strong enough, and even in this dire situation, Jose insists that it keeps rolling. Before Carla gets any further, Jose tells her to be careful and try to find them a way out, as she starts to look around, but there's not much she can do as she doesn't have any Pokemon of her own. She then sees a wild Weepinbell in one of the trees and asks for its help. It doesn't seem to be responding, so she pulls out some rare candies from within her bag and feeds them to it. As a token of its appreciation, it extends its vines into the pit below as Carla tells the two of them to grab on. Weepinbell, with the help from Carla and Gengar, start to pull them out. Jose has a good chuckle after he makes it out, but just as Marino is about to escape, a wild Muk appears from within the mud, trying to pull him back in, as he loses his grip over the vine. But just before Muk pulls him completely under, Carla manages to grab hold of one of his hands, as that is all that is remaining in the mud. Although Carla is starting to lose her grip and be dragged in herself, in a last-minute effort, Jose throws out his Tamantasma, having it use Lick, extending its long film tongue and stealing Muk's memories, causing it to retreat back into the mud as it's clearly disturbed. Then Tamantasma uses its strength to pull them out. Rather than being thankful for their efforts to save him, Marino throws yet another tantrum, saying his suit is ruined. Carla then thanks the wild Weepinbell for its help, as it ends up lunging at her, devouring the rest of her bag. Jose asks Gengar if it managed to get any of this on camera, and it shakes its head in excitement. Afterwards, they finally find a river, which Marino, being a water-type specialist, says they should be able to follow to the lake for their next scene, pointing at a small fishing boat on the shore. Although Jose seems a little uncomfortable with this idea, as it gives him flashbacks of his parents' accident. However, none of them would be able to pick up on this, and he sucks it up and gets in as they ride it through to the river. Seeing some wild Pokemon in the water, they stop to get a few shots to add into the movie. But then, Carla spots a Cucavile in the water, and shortly afterwards Marino spots several more, as their boat is surrounded from all ends. José, unfazed, tells them to channel this fear for the film as he looks at Gengar to make sure it's getting all of this on camera. The horde of Cucavile starts inching closer and closer to the boat, with Carla and Marino both terrified. Marino says he didn't sign up for this, but José kindly reminds him that he did in fact sign up for this movie and is under contract. Just as one of the Cucavile starts to climb onto the boat, it suddenly backs off back into the water as they all begin to swim away. Relieved but confused, Carla looks around asking what happened, but then they all spot a very scary Cruelca rising to the surface as if it's found its next meal, slowly swimming towards the boat like a ticking time bomb. And even José looks scared this time around. But this is short-lived, as once again he tells Gengar to keep rolling, but Cruelca hurls out a sludge bomb attack, just barely missing their boat. Marino, panicking, says this can't be how his story ends, and throws out his Gentlfin, who as a fairy type is super effective against Cruelca. He has it use its signature move River Dance, but it doesn't have much effect on Cruelca, outside of causing it to be infatuated with it, causing his Gentlfin to transform into its beefy bachelor form. But this doesn't stop Cruelca from biting back with a powerful crunch attack. Gentlfin manages to break free from its jaws using Play Rough, which packs quite the punch, as it's super effective. But Cruelca then dives into the water. Frightened, Marino looks all around and can't see where it went, as it pops up from behind, trying to get onto their boat. But luckily, Gengar, while still recording, manages to launch a powerful Shadow Ball attack at it before it can do so, once again being super effective. Seeing how much they've managed to weaken this beast, José decides to seize the moment and capture it, successfully doing so, adding this ghoulish Pokemon to his team of ghost types. After this heart-pumping series of events, they once again try to catch their breath before continuing down the river. As they arrive at the lake, José lost his parents, where he says they must wait for the rest of the crew so they can shoot the next scene. As they're waiting, Marino takes this opportunity to tell Carla he's sorry for being such a jerk, and that she's doing a fine job so far, that she even reminds him a little bit of his little sister Maria. Carla, laughing, then admits that she knows who she is, that she grew up watching the entire Oceania trio, and Maria was her favorite. Marino kinda scoffs at this, saying she was everybody's favorite, and then Carla says it's quite sad what happened to her. Marino goes silent for a moment, before opening up to her and admitting that he played a part in what happened to her, saying he's not proud of it, and that nobody would like him if they knew the real him, and that he's nothing like the characters he plays in the movies, that he's a fraud. Seeing Marino be so vulnerable, José tells Gengar to stop rolling. Unsure what to say, Carla goes to comfort him, and tells him it's never too late to change, or at the very least say sorry, that sometimes that's the most noble thing you can do. He then says he wishes it was that easy, but it isn't, as he's about to tell her something very important. But this moment is interrupted as their boat is flipped, and they are all flung into the water. Once again, while underwater, José sees Monswyrm's large silhouette, just as he did when he was a child the day he lost his parents. But this time, it comes rushing at him as it tries to devour him. Luckily, Marino's Gentlfin swoops in to save the day, fending off this monstrous creature and bringing him back to the surface, where the other two are already waiting. Together, they all try to flip the boat back over and climb back in before it's too late. But then Carla is pulled back into the water by the Monswyrm, as Marino goes to dive after her almost instinctually, something very much out of character for him, at least off-screen. Marino then continues to swim deeper and deeper to try to rescue her, but before he can get to her, the Monswyrm's serpent-like body intercepts him under the water. Unable to hold his breath any longer, he has no choice but to rush back up to the surface for air, where he asks for his Gentlfin's help, before diving back in after her. José also throws out his newly acquired Cruelca to help assist them. Gentlfin and Cruelca battle Monswyrm under the water, freeing Carla from its grasp. and allowing Marino to grab hold of her as he starts to swim back to the surface. But shortly after they manage to climb back onto the boat, they see both Gentlfin and Cruelca hurled out of the water with great force. As the Monswyrm slowly emerges from the depths, finally revealing its monstrous face, much to everyone's surprise, as up until now, they had no idea what they were actually up against, let alone a legendary Pokemon, or the actual Monswyrm. As they discover, it is indeed real, and far more horrifying than they could ever imagine. Marino tells his Gentlfin to use River Dance in an attempt to get it infatuated with it, but Monswyrm manages to evade its attack by diving back into the water, bursting out using a powerful Sludge Bomb attack, which causes Gentlfin to faint immediately after making contact, as it's super effective. José commands his Cruelca to use Crunch, but it seems to bite off more than it can chew, as Monswyrm, being a lot bigger, pulls it deep into the water with it. Marino then convinces them they need to make it back to the shore to even the playing field, as Monswyrm is at a clear advantage in the water. So they start to frantically paddle back as Monswyrm is distracted. But when Monswyrm and Macumbane finally emerge, Cruelca has revealed to have fainted, as it floats on the surface of the water, before José returns it to its Pokeball. They continue to row back to shore as fast as they can, but Monswyrm seems to be trailing behind them beneath the surface, as it pops out right in front of them. But Gengar manages to use Psychic, preventing Monswyrm from swallowing their boat whole, and creating enough distance for them to make it to shore. Monswyrm launches another powerful Sludge Bomb attack directly at them, as they all manage to jump out of the boat and onto the muddy shore just in the nick of time, as Monswyrm's attack demolishes their boat. Gengar then hurls a Shadow Ball attack back at it, but it brushes it off as if it were nothing. José then tells his Gengar to sit this one out for a while, as he throws out his Tamantasma to continue on with the fight. Marino then throws out another Pokemon of his own, Guillotter, a fighting water type, known for its close combat and grappling attacks, starting off strong with a powerful Force Bomb, as Tamantasma uses Shadow Claw. But Monswyrm, even after taking their attacks both head-on, barely flinches as it proceeds to burrow under the ground, which takes them all by surprise. But José, remembering the muddy trench from earlier, points out the fact that they can at least see where it's tunneling through the mud, removing the element of surprise, allowing them to plan their attacks. So when Monswyrm finally emerges from the ground, Guillotter and Tamantasma are both ready. Guillotter grabs hold of it using a chokehold attack, holding it down, so Tamantasma can land a direct attack. But it's so slippery, Guillotter starts to lose its grip, struggling to hold on to it. José then tells his Tamantasma to use its signature attack, Memory Montage, as he wants to use Tamantasma's mem-reading abilities to see what really happened to his parents that dreaded day. As Tamantasma manages to use its film tongue to devour some of Monswyrm's memories, projecting them onto a nearby tree, revealing the truth as it turns out Monswyrm only capsized his family's fishing boat and attacked his parents after his father's fishing hook got caught in one of its eyes, and his father continued to pull at it aggressively, thinking he caught another large Pokemon like a Gyarados, aggravating and hurting the poor Monswyrm as it lashed out at them, assuming they were intentionally trying to harm or capture it like many others have over the centuries. Tamantasma continues playing more of Monswyrm's memories, showing just how terrible people have been to it in the past, treating it as some sort of horrific monster. Then it cuts back to the tragic day José lost his family, just before Monswyrm was about to attack young José in the water. However, before it made contact, it ended up seeing just how young and small he was, deciding to spare him as it swam back down to the depths, which is when José opened his eyes, seeing its silhouette. Before Tamantasma can play any more of Monswyrm's memories, Monswyrm manages to slip out from Guillotter's grasp, sending it flying into one of the trees, before hitting Tamantasma with a gut-punching Poison Tail attack, pummeling it into the mud. Both Tamantasma and Guillotter struggle to get up, shaking uncontrollably as they're barely hanging on, as Monswyrm looms over them without a single scratch on it. Marino is ready to call out his next attack, but before he can do so, José directs him to stop, holding his hands out in the air, waving a metaphoric white flag, as he fearlessly walks towards the Monswyrm, speaking directly to it, after what he just witnessed.
Stop! You probably don't remember me, but I could never forget you. I'm the little boy from the water, and while I am grateful to have been spared, I'd be lying if I said a part of me didn't die that day with my family. But thanks to you, I found a new family of ghost Pokémon, as well as my passion. I spent so much time fearing you, or blaming you. But the truth is, you're not a monster. Not like the ones in my movies. Like me, you're just misunderstood.
Monswyrm descends down to José, with its monstrous face right in front of his own, looking directly in his eyes, trying to process his pain, as he is able to see the pain in its eyes. I saw firsthand all those terrible things that have been done to you by ignorant humans.
I watched your story, and it absolutely moved me. Like a good film, it helped me look at things through a new perspective. I'm a man of many words, but what I'm trying to say is, I forgive you, and I hope that you could forgive me for being no better than all of the other humans that have hurt you in the past. But I assure you, you are safe now.
He slowly reaches out his hand to pet it, and hesitant, it initially pulls back, but ends up letting him, as it's clearly never been shown kindness by a human before. Monswyrm, seemingly liking it, nudges at him, acting like a little pup, as if it wants him to continue petting it. Carla says how cute it is, and Marino, still in shock, is unsure what to make of the situation. José then asks Monswyrm if it would like to star in his film, saying he would make sure to share its story with the rest of the world, so they know it isn't really the monster most people believe it to be. Monswyrm seems to accept his offer, as it starts doing tricks in the water, splashing everyone as they laugh. José says he'll take that as a yes. They manage to capture a couple shots, and even film a couple scenes with it, before bidding farewell to Monswyrm. José is clearly touched, having finally faced his trauma head-on. Inspired, he quickly turns around and claims the script must be rewritten, telling Marino his character may get his happy ending after all, as the Monswyrm clearly isn't the monster he believed it to be. That is, of course, if he still wants to be part of this film. Marino takes a moment to chew this over, before saying he would continue on with the movie. In one condition, he receives hazard pay for the events of this evening. But José stops him right there, saying he already got his happy ending, and that was a rhetorical question, as he's still under contract. He then pulls his Gengar aside, asking to look at some of the footage it got throughout the evening. At this point, Carla approaches Marino, asking if she could have a picture with him for her socials. But he promptly says no, which she takes gracefully, before telling him she was always told you should never meet your heroes, as they will only disappoint you. But then, much to his surprise, proceeds to say, despite what he may think of himself, that he more than lived up to her expectations, and she wishes his sister Maria could have been there to see what he did back there for her, saying she'd be proud of him, diving in to save her from Monswyrm, saying it was far more heroic than anything he's ever done in one of his movies. And as a big fan, she's seen all of them at least 100 times. Marino's face lights up with joy, as he really needed to hear that, fighting to hold back his tears and trying to keep his tough guy composure, before caving and offering her that photo after all, saying it's the least he could do for a super fan. But then José points out to the water, as they all look out to see none other than the film's leading lady, Nessa, showing up fashionably late, surfing on the back of her dreadnought, waving to them off in the distance, with the remainder of the crew following behind her on their own boats or Pokemon. After making it to the shore, Marino breaks out his charm and tries to make a move on Nessa, but she brushes right past him and straight to her cousin Carla, as she gives her a big hug, saying and here she was worried that Carla would make her look bad after getting her this job. Then Carla tells Nessa that no one in the world could make her look bad, as Nessa starts to do a twirl, modeling for everyone, as José's Gengar's tongue drops out of its mouth in awe, as does Marino's. Nessa apologizes for being so late, saying she just got lost and like them had no service. Carla tells her she's just glad she's okay, as she was really worried about her, jokingly saying she feared the Monswyrm had gotten to her. Nessa then laughs, saying as if, implying the Monswyrm doesn't really exist, before asking what she missed, as the three of them all look at each other, before laughing. But this is short-lived, as Jose says,
"Alright people, enough dilly-dallying. Now that everyone is here, let's get back to work. We do have a movie to make after all." If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment down below to let me know what you thought of it, what your favorite part of the story was, what your favorite new Pokemon was, and of course please make sure to subscribe, not only to my channel, but to all the pages of all the artists I commissioned to bring all these ideas to life, as this video wouldn't be possible without them. And happy Halloween!